I got new headphones for Christmas, so
Very fancy.
Oh.
you know what? They're great on the airplane because they're noise canceling,
Mm.
which I will turn off for now. But
Gee, thanks.
okay, call the meeting to order. You ready, Sarah?
You're ready.
Okay. Approval of agenda. Are there any late items? Okay. If I could have a motion then for approval of the agenda, please. That's Kirsty, and seconded by Betty. All in favor? Great. Passed. Adoption of minutes. So we have the minutes from the meeting of November 14th, 2024. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we bring the motion? Okay, could somebody who was actually at that meeting make the motion? Kirsty, seconded by Betty. All in favor? Great, unanimously. Okay, I take it there's no members of the public present, so no public comments. Council referral, that sounds like you're up, Dan. Daniel?
That is me. Let me. All right, so I have a short presentation I'll go over with you. This is an application that you have seen before, but this will help refresh everyone's memory. Okay, this is a rezoning application at 564 Collins Road, and it is now an amendment bylaw that has been referred to the APC by council. So this is this property that's on Collins Road, past the little red church, if you were to go in that way, past the Collins Farm strata, and it straddles Collins Road. So lot exists both on the north and south side of the road. The property is about 3 hectares in size, which if I convert in my head, it's about 7.5 acres. And the proposal is to rezone the property to allow the lot to be subdivided into 2. So 1 lot on each side of Collins Road, and each would be about 1.4 hectares in area. And then it doesn't show up super well here, but you can see that similar subdivisions have happened with the other lots. Like if you looked back in time, you'd see originally these lots as well were 1 lot that straddled Collins Road, and then at some point in the 70s or 80s, they were subdivided to be 2 lots on each side of Collins Road. Just proposal where we are now. So the application was introduced to council. It was referred to the APC and the Parks and Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee. So you've seen this before. Bylaw was presented for first reading to council, and then this is the referral to the Islands Trust, the APC, before we have to continue with second reading, a public hearing, a third reading, send to the Islands Trust for approval, and bylaw adoption. Just to remind us the second time that you've seen this application. And at your first APC referral, which when I looked was in July, so had some time. So you supported the application, you support the proposed contribution, which is for an area of land to be protected to equal 50% of the site to be protected from development. You support the applicant's offer of a future trail connection to Crippen Park, and you're encouraged by the support of the neighbors. So the application was introduced to council, had received letters of support from the surrounding neighbors. So new since you saw this, it also went to the Parks and Trails Greenways Advisory Committee. And they also supported the application. They provided comments about, after doing a site visit, they proposed the trail amenities should connect to the unofficial trail in Crippen Park, so to extend further than initially proposed. Consideration be given to habitat value and ecological qualities in designating protected conservation covenant areas, and that staff explore other designations such as park designations for the protected area. And just highlighting the proposed trail connection here. So the red on the map shows sort of what was envisioned as the trail connection. So to connect Collins Road through the property to connect to Crippen Park, which is here as the closest point. And what the Parks and Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee noted was that shown here on our bow map mapping, there's an informal trail across through Crippen that then comes down and joins. This is then that main trail that runs up from essentially from the parking lot by the Catholic Church and runs up to Killarney Lake. And this trail exists now and connects. And then currently what you'll see what the trail does is actually sort of crosses the southern property at an angle and comes all the way out here. And what the Parks and Trails Greenways Advisory Committee was recommending is that a trail right of way be extended down about another 90 meters to connect to this trail point here. And when I brought this to council in November, I brought some discussion from the applicant who was nervous about this trail extension, in part because they had foreseen this area in the middle of the lot as being the potential building site of a dwelling on the property. So you can see on sort of our BOMAP approximation of building envelope showing where a house was built on 551 and kind of thinking that was a similar location of where a house could be built. And so nervous about the impact of the greater trail easement. But so the two bylaws that were given first reading, bylaw 671 would amend the OCP. So it would change the designation of the property from going from R1 rural to be RS rural residential. And bylaw 672 would amend the land use bylaw. It would place the northern portion of the property into the settlement residential 1A zone to match the southern portion of the property. And so the effect of both these changes would mean it would permit the subdivision of the property into two parcels. And then, so when it went to council in November, it was referred to the Islands Trust Executive Committee, the Islands Trust Conservancy, and the Advisory Planning Commission, so where we are today. And I've just included on the screen here the response, part of the response from the Islands Trust Conservancy. And I also included their letter in our agenda for people who wanted to read more in it. But highlights of their response, they commend our goal of 50% protection, emphasize ecological conditions and biodiversity values prioritized when determining where they are. They encouraged us to pursue parkland dedication to better protect valuable habitat, and that we should consider potential negative impacts of creating a new trail through an undeveloped area on biodiversity and habitat integrity. And then I didn't include, but I'll also note the Islands Trust Executive Committee has provided their response as well, that the bylaw is not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. So that brings to here's the recommendation in the agenda is the APC support or do not support these bylaws for this application. And I will stop my screen sharing and open for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah,
Betty.
I have a question.
Oh.
So Daniel, did you say that this is an informal trail through the private property? Is there any indication of an easement that trail may have on that private property or not?
No. So where the trail currently crosses the property, no, there's no easement. It was sort of just like a neighborhood trail. And then where the trail exists in Crippen, our understanding is there's several sort of informal trails in Crippen Regional Park that the Crippen sort of policy is they don't advertise them, like they don't map them on their maps, but they will allow them to continue to exist. So
Okay, so as a goodwill gesture, the applicant is proposing an extension of this trail formally as an easement through their property.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I think Betty was next and then Kirsty.
I'm just unclear whether it sounded from reading the Islands Trust document and from Parks and Trails that it depends on the sensitivity of the land, and I don't feel like we have the information to make any comment about that. What's our responsibility in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When we introduced it to council, there was a environmental assessment that was brought with the application, and so we do have it in that previous, but I would have to go dig for it. And essentially, what it highlighted is that like the northern half of the property has a wetland about halfway through halfway down in the property, and then at the northern end of that northern half, there's like a essentially rock outcrops. Like the land goes up quite steeply, rock outcrops with ferns and whatever else. Yeah, so I mean, what we would typically be bringing to council is saying we would approve the rezoning conditional on, and we would place like a master covenant on the property that would say when you subdivide, you have to provide this trail easement to whatever extent sort of we've agreed on, and you have to provide protective covenants that 50% of the land is covenanted, with the idea being in a sense that like council And maybe the covenant could say, and that 50% would include the identified wetland and the identified rock outcropping as identified in this environmental assessment report. With the idea being that we're trying to leave some sense of like through the subdivision process, they will better define, where a building area is. But that's our goal is, 50% is protected and we're protecting the identified sensitive areas. But like council through their rezoning isn't actually drawing on the map where that 50% is.
I like that part of it, and I'd like if we could capture that language. I'm not comfortable with designating a path or not, because depending on the sensitivity of the land and where it is,
Right.
it may not be appropriate, which is what I'm hearing both from Islands Trust and from Crippen sort of saying they're not officially designating those trails. Like
Right.
they're not
Okay.
encouraging them. So can we leave the trail bit out if we want to?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Kirsty.
Yeah, I was just confused. So there's the owner offered the first little bit of red trail, and then council wanted it to, or Parks and Trails wanted it to go to the further down the property. Then the owner was unhappy because the house was going to be there. What's happened about that is like, I don't just too bad, so sad for the owner, or
yeah, I would say, like I introduced it to council, this was still a sort of question outstanding. And I would say it probably like still is, like partly we referred it to the Islands Trust Conservancy to see if they had comment. And their comment was essentially like caution for trails, especially through undisturbed areas. It's coming to you, and then it would come back to council. So after I'm done, this meeting, I think I'll be going back to the applicant to see what their sort of final position is to bring it to council. And council could say, we're happy with it just connecting to Crippen like originally proposed. They could say, no, we want it to go all the way down, that trail, that extended future trail is important to us, and we're not willing to proceed with second reading until that happens.
Okay. Daniel, can you bring that map up again that
Sure.
Kirsty was referring to?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just bear with me a sec.
Okay, and that one, yeah, thank you. So I have
jumped there. All right.
So I have walked from Collins Road to the official trail in Crippen. And what I'm trying to work out is where we entered Crippen. And my sense is that it was at the bottom of the bright red part, even though the trail looks like it begins much further south of that.
So if you walked from, if you walked from Collins, you would walk from about this corner of the property. If you see my mouse, and through
there it is. Yeah. Okay.
Kind of through and kind of to like here, and then you're coming this way.
Okay,
somewhere in here there is there's like a private, or there's a Crippen Park sign somewhere around here that will kind of mark where you're okay. We can tell, and then you're kind of lining up like this fence line of 577 Collins, even though you're all the way over here. You can see, and you can see, okay, now I'm crossing into Crippen. But like sort of where the current trail is, wouldn't remain, because it kind of does this big diagonal straight across.
Okay, I do remember that you do get fairly close to the house that's on 551, and they have some. Okay.
You might even be starting from here, like by their driveway and in.
Okay. So
the question is, sorry, why doesn't the park just have the trail in the park? Like, why does it need to impact this?
Yeah.
Well, I guess
like this lot at all, except for the first red bit. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree.
I would add to that. It just seems like this existing trail connects through to Collins Road via a trespassing situation. That's kind of to date.
I was trying to be diplomatic when I said it was close to somebody's house, but I think that's exactly right.
So it is a goodwill gesture on behalf of the applicants to actually provide this as an easement.
Yeah, I think the people in 551 would appreciate it. And I don't know if anyone else has walked that trail. It's pretty rough. And clearly it's not being groomed at all. But isn't the paradox here, though, that there's a trail that Islands Trust is not, or the Crippen Park people are not keen to publicize, and yet we're making it publicized. We're almost putting a signpost up.
Well, wouldn't it be the case that the trail within the park proper would still be informal
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
trail? So
And if it's informal, why can't it be on the part that's already there? Like, I think it's just really ridiculous asking the owner to have it on their side of the property line when it could easily be on the other side of the property line, the purple bit.
Well, if it's right on the property line, does it really matter, Kirsty?
Well, I don't know. It's a because it's then designated or like delineated that way, and it's not really. It's just why ask them to do it.
Yeah. Well, what I like about it is that it does take away the current access
For
that
sure.
that Daniel described.
But
Which is
it's
not-
just the red line doesn't bother me. It's the purple line that I just don't get why they would ask.
Yeah, I think the Parks Committee, I'm trying to remember what they said, but they were in favor of the purple line, right, Daniel?
Yeah, let me see. Okay, that the proposed trail amenity should connect to the unofficial trail in Crippen Park and allow for, yeah, so that's the one. Is they had looked at it like, this is where the existing footpath is. Let's connect to that. Like, let's connect to the original, or the sort of the existing footpath, and that should be the goal for connection.
Okay.
what is the applicant's position on the purple line? Do we know?
They were hesitant, but I think in part because of like they don't have firm development plans for like how the lot would be developed, and so they're worried about sort of putting encumbrances on the property that might impact, where ultimately things end up going on the
Yeah,
lot.
because that does not affect the setback, but it
No.
does pose a public access path, which effectively impacts the building code compliance aspect of any structure that would be constructed in proximity to this path. So
Yeah.
it is a hindrance from their perspective.
Yeah. Plus the privacy issue, for what it's worth. I mean, people are going to walk through there anyway.
But whose responsibility is it to make the trail and maintain it? If it's on the landowners, then are this people just the parks people trying to dump it onto a responsibility of the landowner to have the trail as opposed to having the park have it?
Actually, that's
And the
a good point.
legality of it?
Like the municipality would, if we had the right of way for the trail, typically then we would maintain it as part of the trail easement.
Okay. Is the parks dedication relevant to that as well? I didn't quite understand what the Parks Committee was getting at.
No, I think that's more because we discussed, okay, how should the land be protected? And so one option discussed was like protective covenant, where we have several, we put a covenant on, we say you can't build, you can't disturb the land in this area. Another option would be to say, actually, we want you to dedicate this as park, and it would be no longer part of your property, it would be a dedicated park.
And I have heard in the past that the municipalities are a little bit leery of parks dedication because that brings obligations and expenses. That, as we know, looking at the budget, it's.
I mean, I guess it depends. It's like we want parks, where they make sense. So like if we're looking for like public access for something, if we're looking for, whatever the goals are for parkland,
But you can have
but-
public access without a park, right?
Yeah.
By
And
way of
often,
easement
like,
or-
we're not often a fan of sort of like fragmented parks, right? Like they make more sense when they're a larger area.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
not sure I want to tread on the toes of the Parks Committee. But it seems to me that we are still in favor of the application. And, how did Camp Owen show up there? That's different.
I think that's Councillor Jurgensen
Oh, I see. Okay.
Richard.
Welcome, Alex.
and Richard.
Yes, my
Sorry,
apologies.
didn't
for
want to
the-
interrupt.
Okay. So I think we're still in favor, and I think the conditions recommendations we made last time still apply. But we're wrestling with this trail and how it could be handled. And I will tell you why I'm torn. I like the idea of moving the trail immediately adjacent to Crippen Park so that not just the people in 551, but the applicant will also not have people cutting across their property. But I do wonder if we're using a hammer on a gnat, if that's the right metaphor.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense that they have to allow, they allow the trail to run to the edge of the park from Collins Road, but I really feel it's overreach that then the trail has to be on the private property as opposed to on Crippen Park. Like it makes it's just like a land grab. And yes, it's a tiny little trail, but it's ridiculous. Like, why would you force the trail to be on private property when the park's right there?
Yeah, although I'd like the idea of regularizing something that's going to happen anyway.
But if the trail is just the red thing, then Crippen Park, if they want to have it join up, they can, because the trail isn't there now.
Yeah. Betty.
Yeah, and I agree with Christy, and I feel like we don't have the information about whether that's a particularly sensitive area. And I know when I've talked with the Bowen Conservancy about land that they might like to have, that they're not always eager to have trails into certain areas. So I don't feel like we have the information to designate that second part of the trail. I think we should just leave it
Mhm.
open, and if Crippen or whoever eventually wants to make a trail, they'll have to do the hoops of the environmental study.
Can I suggest a bit of a compromise, and that is that that council consider the minimum requirement concerning trail and access to Crippen Park from Collins Road.
Okay,
Like me to bring up the draft, like a draft one, so you can see it and sort of word something together.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm still sort of thinking that, if this subdivision is not approved, then the owners can opt not to allow any future access to the park through their property.
Okay.
That's kind
Yeah.
of like the starting point for me here. So the red line as their offer is already fairly generous.
But you wouldn't make it a condition of this current rezoning, right, Martin?
Well, they're offering it, so yes,
the first part,
the red part, the
yeah,
red
to
line.
the corner.
The purple, yeah, from a perspective of our mandate here, I don't see that as a viable
Okay, no.
idea to support.
Okay, so I think the first part, I think we're all agreed on the 50%. I think that's going to be not a condition, but a serious consideration in all future planning decisions. Maybe we could change the second comment. The proposed trail connection extend from Collins Road to Crippen Park with minimum impact on any sensitive, environmentally sensitive areas, and the use of the applicant, use of the property by the applicant.
Mhm.
Which is sort of the balance you have to seek every time anyway, but and I tell you, my sense is we need to decommission the informal trespass trail, which crosses right diagonally across the property and can't be good for the environment anyway.
Would it make sense to add something along the lines of the closest possible point to where these factors become true?
I'd like to add something like that.
Okay. Where would you put those words, folks? Closest possible. Okay.
Closest
Maybe
practical point.
I was going to say
I don't know.
practical rather than
Practical.
possible.
Yeah,
Close-
practical is good.
Closest possible is right there at that the corner of the lot.
Yeah. With the minimum impact. Yeah, I think that's great.
Proposed extends for cars to the closest practical point within Crippen Park with minimum. Okay. And I'm trying to remember what else did we? Oh, we. I assume the neighbors are still in support, right, Daniel? That was the other thing.
I haven't heard anything more
Okay.
from them. So
Certainly, if I lived in 551, I'd be very much in favor of this. Are there any other recommendations or conditions? Okay. Are we ready to call the motion, everyone? No further comments or
Think so.
questions?
I have nothing to add.
Okay, would somebody like to propose the motion then as Sarah has drafted it for us?
I will.
Thanks,
I
Betty.
propose the motion as Sarah has drafted it.
Okay. Seconder?
I will do that.
Thank you,
Out of
Martin.
focus camera.
Yeah, I have trouble with
Disappearing
lighting
hand.
here. I don't know if it's the hair loss or what, but okay. If we could, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Yeah. No, you should, if you haven't walked down there, you should do that anyway. I'll leave it at that. Okay, and I lost my agenda, but I'm guessing that was the only referral, right, Daniel?
correct.
And
Yeah.
Sarah? Okay. Any information items?
Not on the agenda. I'll just flag at the council meeting on Monday. I do have a report that is recommending referral to the APC. So for those of you who are very keen, you could dig up the agenda and get a sneak preview. If not, then, depending how council goes, we'll be canvassing for another meeting. I guess
I'm sure we will all look at it, Daniel. Is it your report?
It is my report.
Well, then it's worth the trouble.
Okay. I'll give you the link in the chat.
Okay. Could you just give us a hint what it's about? I did get the email with the agenda, but I haven't had a chance to look at it.
It's on a draft policy for the process for disposal of municipal lands for affordable housing.
Wow, that sounds like something it'll take a few minutes.
It's as exciting as it sounds.
I should tell you something. I spent a month in Japan, which is why I missed the last meeting, and I actually got a chance to talk about planning with some people there. They have 9 million vacant houses.
What?
And most of them are in rural and remote areas, but we did see them in Tokyo and Kyoto and so on. And there's all kinds of very, very complicated reasons for it. Not the least of which is the land tenure system and the fact that many of the houses are not freehold or our version of freehold. So there's not a lot of, sometimes if a house gets really run down, it's cheaper just to walk away from it.
Yeah.
It just struck me how so totally different from our situation that is. But anyway, just an interesting little bit of comparative planning law.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. So I think we're up to adjournment.
Yay.
Don't all jump in there at once.
Well,
I think Richard got it.
yeah, again, apologies for being late. I just couldn't get a connection for whatever reason.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was a little worried about all the wind and what it might do to my Wi-Fi, but okay. So, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. I feel that was a good meeting.
It was a good meeting and
Yes.
wonderfully short. Thank you.
Ew.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Sarah,
Okay.
Daniel, and
Yes,
Alex.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Take care.